In a luxurious Dallas kitchen, Jacob Taylor is preparing a gourmet dinner for his wife Emily's family. But behind the perfect facade lies a secret that will shatter his world. When he accidentally overhears a conversation that reveals Emily's infidelity, Jacob decides not to give up. Can he outwit those who want to take away everything he's built? Find out how this exciting story of betrayal, revenge, and justice unfolds. The scent of smoked brisket filled every corner of Jacob Taylor's sleek, modern kitchen in his upscale Dallas penthouse. At 42, Jacob moved with the confidence of a man who'd earned his place in the world. His hands, still calloused from years spent wrenching under car hoods as a teenager, now adjusted the oven's temperature with precision. Tonight's dinner had to be flawless, not because he craved approval from his wife Emily's family, but because that's who Jacob was, a man who did things right. The clock on the wall read 6:45 p.m. 15 minutes until the Wilsons arrived. Jacob glanced at the dining table, set with crisp linens and polished silverware. A bouquet of fresh lilies, Emily's favorite, sat as the centerpiece. Everything was in place, yet a quiet unease gnawed at him. Emily had been distant lately, her smiles fleeting, her eyes often glued to her phone. He chalked it up to stress from her high-pressure job at a downtown PR firm, but the doubt lingered like a shadow. Jacob had built his empire from nothing. The son of a small-town mechanic, he'd opened his first auto dealership at 25, pouring every ounce of grit into making it succeed. Now, at 42, he owned 5 luxury car showrooms across Dallas, each one a testament to his relentless drive. People respected Jacob, not just for his success, but for his fairness. In a city where flash often trumped substance, he was a rare breed, honest, hard-working, and unapologetically himself. The kitchen door swung open, and Emily stepped in, her navy dress hugging her slender frame. At 32, she was as stunning as the day they'd met 8 years ago at a charity auction. Her chestnut hair fell in soft waves, and her green eyes sparkled, though Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that the warmth in them had faded. "Smells amazing in here," she said, her voice light, but her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Trying to impress your mom," Jacob replied with a grin, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "You know how she is about Texas cooking." Emily gave a small nod, her gaze flickering to her phone as it buzzed on the counter. She silenced it quickly, but not before Jacob caught the gesture. "Everything okay?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "Fine. Just work," she said, tucking the phone into her pocket. "They're almost here," Mom texted. "They're turning into the neighborhood." Jacob nodded, turning back to the cornbread he'd just pulled from the oven. Perfect timing. He arranged the golden slices on a platter, mentally bracing himself for the evening ahead. The Wilsons had never fully embraced him. Linda Wilson, with her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer pearls, treated him like an outsider who'd somehow conned her daughter into marriage. Frank, her husband, a retired oil executive, spoke to Jacob only in clipped sentences, usually about market trends or tax policies, laced with subtle jabs about Jacob's blue-collar roots. And then there was Nathan, Emily's older brother, whose smug arrogance was matched only by his knack for burning through jobs faster than most people change cars. But they were Emily's family, and for her, Jacob would endure anything. He loved her, had loved her since the moment she'd laughed at one of his terrible jokes at that auction. Even now, with the tension between them, he believed in their life together. Or at least, he wanted to. The doorbell chimed, its melodic tone cutting through the hum of the kitchen. "I'll get it," Emily called, hurrying toward the foyer. Jacob heard the door open, followed by a burst of enthusiastic greetings. Linda's high-pitched cooing, Frank's gruff acknowledgement, Nathan's drawling sarcasm. He straightened his shoulders, plastered on a warm smile, and stepped out to meet them. "Jacob, there you are." Linda's voice carried across the room as she swept in, her perfume overpowering. "The chef himself, hard at work." "Linda, great to see you," Jacob said, accepting her stiff hug while dodging the cloud of scent. "Hope you brought your appetite." Frank extended a firm handshake, his grip just shy of a challenge. "Nice spread, Jacob. Traffic was hell getting here, as usual." "Always is," Jacob replied smoothly, turning to Nathan, who leaned against the doorway in a blazer that screamed, "Trying too hard." "Still playing house husband, Jake?" Nathan smirked, swirling a glass of bourbon he'd already helped himself to from the bar cart. Emily shot her brother a warning glance, but Jacob just chuckled. Someone's gotta feed you, Nate. Lord knows you can't boil water without burning the place down. Linda's lips pursed, but Nathan forced a laugh. Touché. Dinner's ready, Jacob announced, gesturing toward the dining room. Let's eat. The table was a vision of southern elegance: slow-roasted brisket, garlic mashed potatoes, cornbread, roasted vegetables, and a pecan cranberry salad Emily loved. Candlelight danced off the crystal glassware, casting a warm glow over the scene. To an outsider, it might have looked like a perfect family gathering. But Jacob felt the undercurrent of tension, like a storm brewing just out of sight. This looks wonderful, Jacob, Linda said, her tone grudging as she took her seat. Jacob's always been the better cook, Emily added, squeezing his hand under the table. Her touch was fleeting, almost perfunctory. Frank grunted, piling brisket onto his plate. Not bad for a car salesman. Jacob caught the dig, but let it slide. I prefer automotive entrepreneur, but salesman works too, he said with a wink. How's business, Jacob? Nathan asked, pouring himself a generous glass of Jacob's best Cabernet. Still got those 5 dealerships? 6 now, Jacob corrected mildly. Opened one in Plano last month. Thinking about Fort Worth next. Impressive, Linda said, though her voice suggested she found it anything but. You must be working all hours. It's a grind, Jacob admitted, but I've got a great team. My ops manager, Michael, handles a lot of the day-to-day. Michael, Frank repeated, as if testing the name. That's the ex-cop fella? Private investigator now, Jacob said. Known him since high school. Best guy I know. Loyal employees are so hard to find, Linda said, her emphasis on loyal oddly pointed. Emily cleared her throat. Mom, did you tell Jacob about your charity board's new project? The conversation shifted to safer ground. Linda's latest socialite crusade, Frank's golf game, Nathan's vague mentions of consulting gigs. Jacob nodded at the right moments, but his attention was elsewhere. He noticed Emily's phone buzzing again, her quick glance at it, the way she tucked it away. He caught the subtle looks Nathan shot her, the kind that carried meaning he couldn't quite decode. As dessert, homemade peach cobbler was served. Linda dropped her usual bombshell. You two really should think about kids soon, she said, spoon poised over her plate. Emily's 32. Time's ticking. Emily stiffened beside him. Mom, we've talked about this. I'm just saying, dear, Linda pressed. You don't want to wait too long. No rush, Jacob said, placing a hand on Emily's knee. When the time's right, it'll happen. And when will that be? Linda's tone was sharp. After you open your 10th dealership? Mom, Emily warned, her voice tight. Frank set down his fork. What Linda means is, life's not just about work, son. Family matters. Couldn't agree more, Jacob said evenly, meeting Frank's gaze. Family's everything. Loyalty, honesty, that's what holds it together. An awkward silence settled over the table. Jacob offered more wine, breaking the tension, but the air felt heavier now. Something was off, more than usual. The Wilsons had always been cold, but tonight there was an edge to their words, a sense of anticipation, like they were waiting for something to unfold. I'm gonna grab another chair from the garage, Jacob said as they moved to the living room for drinks. Frank, that one you're in is wobbling a bit. I'll help, Nathan offered, starting to rise. No need, Jacob waved him off. Enjoy your bourbon. I'll be right back. The cool evening air hit him as he stepped into the garage. He flipped on the light and headed for the stack of spare chairs in the corner. As he reached for one, voices drifted through the thin wall separating the garage from the patio. You're dragging this out, Emily. Nathan's voice was low, urgent. You need to file for divorce before he gets suspicious. Grant's got everything ready. Half the business is yours. Jacob froze, his hand tightening on the chair. Divorce? His heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay still, to listen. I know, Emily replied, her voice barely audible. But it's not easy, Nate. Jacob, he's a good guy. Good doesn't mean rich forever, Nathan scoffed. Grant says we can take the house too if you play it smart. Just stick to the plan. The words slammed into Jacob like a freight train. His wife, the woman he'd built his life around, was plotting to betray him. Not just leave him, but strip him of everything. His business, his home, his future. The garage seemed to close in around him, the air thick with the weight of her deception. But Jacob didn't crumble. Instead, a cold resolve settled over him. They thought he was oblivious, an easy mark. They didn't know the real Jacob Taylor, the one who'd fought his way from nothing, who'd outsmarted competitors and naysayers alike. He grabbed the chair, his movements deliberate, his face a mask of calm. No one could know what he'd heard, not yet. As he headed back inside, his smile was firmly in place, but his mind was racing. Emily and her family had just made a fatal mistake. They'd underestimated him, and they were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. The Dallas skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jacob Taylor's penthouse, but at 6 a.m., the view offered no comfort. Jacob hadn't slept. The words he'd overheard last night, Emily's quiet agreement to Nathan's plan to divorce him and take half his business, replayed like a broken record in his mind. His coffee sat untouched on the counter, steam curling into the air as he stared at his phone. No messages from Emily, who was still asleep in their bedroom, oblivious to the storm brewing inside him. Jacob wasn't a man to act on impulse. At 42, he learned that success came from strategy, not rage. But the betrayal cut deep, slicing through 8 years of marriage he'd thought was built on love. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. That meant calling the one person he could trust without question, Michael Carter, his high school friend turned private investigator. By 7:30, Jacob sat across from Michael in a quiet corner booth at a diner off Lemon Avenue. The place smelled of bacon and strong coffee, its vinyl seats cracked but comfortable. Michael, a broad-shouldered man with a shaved head and sharp gray eyes, listened as Jacob recounted the patio conversation. "You're sure that's what they said?" Michael asked, scribbling notes on a small pad. "Divorce and half the business?" "Word for word," Jacob said, his voice low but steady. "Nathan mentioned someone named Grant. Sounded like he's running the show." Michael's pen paused. "Grant Russell? You know him?" "Know of him," Michael corrected, leaning back. "Slick divorce attorney. Specializes in high-net-worth cases. Got a reputation for playing dirty. Rumors say he gets too cozy with clients, if you catch my drift." Jacob's jaw tightened. The thought of Emily with another man twisted the knife already lodged in his chest. "Find out everything," he said. "I need to know what I'm up against." "Emily, Nathan, her parents, Linda, and Frank. All of them." Michael nodded. "I'll dig. Phone records, emails, financials. If they're plotting, I'll find the trail. But Jacob, you gotta play it cool. If Emily suspects you know, she'll cover her tracks." "Don't worry," Jacob said, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "As far as she's concerned, I'm still the clueless husband." Back at the penthouse, Jacob found Emily in the kitchen, sipping orange juice and scrolling through her phone. She looked up, her green eyes bright but guarded. "You were up early," she said, setting the phone face down. "Everything okay?" "Supplier issue at the Plano dealership," Jacob lied smoothly, pouring himself a fresh coffee. "Had to make some calls." "How'd you sleep?" "Fine," she said, her smile tight. "Mom wants to do lunch today. You mind?" "Course not," Jacob replied, leaning in to kiss her cheek. The gesture felt hollow, but he sold it. "Tell Linda I said hi." As Emily left for her lunch, Jacob's phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Preliminary stuff already looks bad. Meet me tonight, 8 p.m., my office." The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings at his flagship dealership, but Jacob's mind was elsewhere. Every interaction with his staff, every handshake with a client, was overshadowed by the growing certainty that his life was unraveling. By 8 p.m., he was in Michael's cramped office, a converted loft in deep elm littered with files and coffee cups. Michael didn't waste time. He slid a folder across the desk. "Emily's been meeting with Grant Russell for months. Restaurants, coffee shops, even a hotel bar downtown. Got photos, nothing concrete enough to prove an affair, but it's not looking good." Jacob opened the folder, his stomach churning as he saw Emily laughing with a man in a tailored suit. Grant Russell was handsome in a polished, predatory way, his smirk radiating confidence. "What else?" Jacob asked, closing the folder. "Her family's in on it," Michael said. Text messages between Emily and Nathan, planning sessions, timelines. Linda's been pushing her to secure her future. Frank wired $10,000 to an account I'm still tracing, likely for legal fees. "They're not just after your business, Jacob. They want the penthouse, your investments, the works." Jacob leaned back, processing. "How long?" "At least 6 months," Michael said. "Maybe longer. But here's the kicker. Nathan's got a side hustle. He's been digging into your dealerships, trying to find dirt, tax issues, anything to use as leverage. My guess? He's planning to blackmail you into settling fast." The revelation hit like a spark in dry grass. Blackmail? Nathan wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. "Can you stop him?" Jacob asked. "Already on it," Michael said. "I've got a guy inside Nathan's network." If he's got fabricated evidence, we'll know before he uses it. But you need to protect your assets now. Once Emily files, it'll be harder to move anything without a judge sniffing around. Jacob nodded, his mind racing. I know someone. Laura Bennett, financial consultant. She's a shark when it comes to high-stakes divorces. Good call, Michael said. Get her on board today. And Jacob, keep acting like nothing's wrong. Buy yourself time. Driving home, Jacob felt a strange calm settle over him. The pain was still there, raw and sharp, but it was fuel now. Emily thought she could blindside him, destroy everything he built. Her family thought they could manipulate him into submission. They were wrong. When he walked into the penthouse, Emily was curled up on the couch, a glass of wine in hand. Hey, babe, she said, her voice soft. Long day? You have no idea, Jacob replied, forcing a tired smile. He sat beside her, letting her lean against him, her warmth a cruel reminder of the life he'd thought they had. How was lunch with your mom? Fine, she said, too quickly. Just catching up. Jacob nodded, his arm around her shoulders. Inside, his resolve hardened. He'd play the devoted husband, the unsuspecting fool, until he was ready to strike. Emily and the Wilsons had started this game, but Jacob Taylor was about to rewrite the rules. Jacob Taylor sat in the sleek, glass-walled office of Laura Bennett, a financial consultant known for shielding high rollers from messy divorces. The Dallas skyline stretched beyond the windows, a glittering reminder of the empire he built, and the one Emily and her family aimed to tear apart. At 42, Jacob was no stranger to fights, but this one was personal. The betrayal he'd uncovered 2 days ago, Emily's plan to divorce him and seize half his auto dealerships, had lit a fire in him. He wasn't just going to survive this. He was going to win. Laura, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s with a no-nonsense bob, slid a tablet across her desk. Your assets are vulnerable, she said, tapping the screen to reveal a flowchart. Texas is a community property state. Anything earned during the marriage, your business, the penthouse, Emily's lawyer can argue it's half hers. Unless we move first, Jacob said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. Exactly. Laura's smile was thin but confident. We create a holding company, transfer ownership of your dealerships to it. On paper, you're just a well-paid manager, not the owner. It's legal, but it'll make her settlement demands look like a reach. Jacob nodded. How long? 10 days to set it up. Maybe less if we push, Laura said. But it's not foolproof. Her lawyer, Grant Russell, right? He's slippery. If he smells a rat, he'll dig. Then we keep him distracted, Jacob said, leaning forward. I'm already working on that. Back at the penthouse, Jacob's plan was in motion. He had to keep Emily believing he suspected nothing, which meant playing the role of the devoted husband better than ever. That evening, he arrived home with a bouquet of roses and a velvet box containing a sapphire necklace he knew she'd love. Emily's eyes widened as she opened it, her expression a mix of delight and confusion. Jacob, this is gorgeous, she said, holding the necklace to the light. What's the occasion? No occasion, he lied, stepping close to clasp it around her neck. I've been caught up with work. Wanted to remind you what matters. Her smile wavered, and for a split second, Jacob saw guilt flicker in her green eyes. You're too good to me, she murmured. Leaning in for a kiss he forced himself to return. Every touch felt like a lie, but he played his part flawlessly. Over dinner at a candlelit bistro in Uptown, Jacob kept the charade alive. He asked about her day, laughed at her stories, and dropped hints about a Caribbean getaway just for us. Emily's responses were warm but cautious, her phone buzzing under the table more than once. Jacob pretended not to notice, but each vibration fueled his resolve. She thought she was in control. She had no idea he was pulling the strings. Meanwhile, Michael Carter was digging deeper. At a late-night meetup in a dive bar near Fair Park, the private investigator handed Jacob a USB drive. You're not gonna like this, Michael said, nursing a beer. Emily's affair with Grant Russell, it's not just a fling. They've been at it for 8 months. Hotel receipts, encrypted texts. And Nathan's been feeding them info on your business, trying to pin you for tax evasion. Jacob's grip tightened on his glass. Tax evasion? That's their blackmail angle. Yep, Michael said. Nathan's got fake documents, forged invoices, cooked books. He's planning to leak them to Grant unless you settle fast. But I've got something better. He slid a photo across the table, Nathan meeting a known fixer in a parking lot. This guy? He's been on the FBI's radar. If Nathan's tied to him, it's a house of cards. Jacob pocketed the photo, his mind racing. Nathan's desperation was a weak point he could exploit, but he had to be careful. One wrong move, and Emily might sense the trap closing. Give me everything on that fixer, he said. And keep tabs on Grant. If he's breaking ethics rules, I want proof. Already on it, Michael said. But Jacob, this is getting messy. You sure you want to play this close to the chest? I'm not playing, Jacob said, his voice cold. I'm winning. The next morning, Jacob's phone rang while he was at his flagship dealership. It was Emily, her voice unusually tense. Hey, can we talk tonight? Just us. His pulse quickened. Was she on to him? Sure, he said, keeping his tone light. Everything okay? Yeah, I just miss you, she said, but the words sounded rehearsed. Dinner at home? I'll cook. Sounds perfect, Jacob replied, hanging up with a sinking feeling. Emily cooking was rare. She preferred restaurants to aprons. This wasn't a peace offering. It was a test. That evening, the penthouse smelled of garlic and herbs. Emily's attempt at lasagna surprisingly decent. She poured wine, her smile practiced as she steered the conversation to safe topics. Work, mutual friends, the weather. But Jacob noticed her watching him, searching for cracks in his demeanor. You've been so sweet lately, she said, swirling her glass. The flowers, the necklace, it's like when we first started dating. Trying to keep the spark alive, Jacob said, meeting her gaze. We've both been busy. Thought we could use a reset. Her eyes softened, but there was calculation behind them. I love that about you, she said. You always try so hard. The compliment stung, a reminder of how she'd weaponized his trust. But Jacob smiled, raising his glass. To us. As they cleared the dishes, Emily's phone lit up with a text. She glanced at it, then quickly turned it over. Jacob caught the name, Grant, before she did. Work again? He asked, casual. Just a client, she said, too fast. They're relentless. He nodded, letting it go. But later, when she stepped into the shower, Jacob checked his own phone. A message from Michael waited. Grant's meeting Emily tomorrow, private office. I've got a guy on it. Also, Nathan's fixer just got sloppy. We've got audio. Jacob's heart pounded, not with fear but anticipation. Emily was slipping, her lies piling up like dry kindling. The dinner, the texts, her sudden affection, it was all part of her game to keep him off balance. But Jacob was done being played. He slipped into bed beside her that night, careful to keep his distance. Emily reached for his hand, her touch once a comfort, now a betrayal. Love you, she whispered, already half asleep. Love you too, he said, the words etched in his mouth. As her breathing deepened, Jacob stared at the ceiling, mapping out his next move. Laura's plan would shield his assets. Michael's evidence would bury Nathan's blackmail. And Emily? She'd never see him coming. The game had begun, and Jacob Taylor was playing to win. The chandelier-lit ballroom of Dallas's Fairmont Hotel buzzed with the city's elite, business tycoons, politicians, and socialites gathered for the annual Children's Health Gala. Jacob Taylor, immaculate in a tailored tuxedo, moved through the crowd with a practiced smile, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. At 42, he was a familiar face here, a respected philanthropist whose auto dealerships had made him a quiet force in Dallas. But tonight wasn't about charity. Tonight, Jacob was setting a trap years in the making. Emily clung to his arm, radiant in a sapphire gown he bought her for their 5th anniversary. Her green eyes sparkled, but Jacob knew the warmth was a facade. For weeks, he'd played the doting husband, showering her with gifts, roses, a sapphire necklace, candlelit dinners, all to lull her into complacency. She thought she had him fooled, that her plan to divorce him and claim half his empire was airtight. She didn't know he'd been 3 steps ahead since the night he overheard her scheming with Nathan. Laura Bennett's financial maneuvers had worked like a charm. Jacob's 6 dealerships were now owned by a holding company, Horizon Ventures, with Jacob listed as a salaried manager. On paper, his wealth was a fraction of what Emily and her lawyer, Grant Russell, expected. Michael Carter's investigation had uncovered a goldmine, proof of Emily's 8-month affair with Grant, Nathan's forged documents meant to blackmail Jacob, and even a recorded call where Linda Wilson urged Emily to bleed him dry. The Wilsons thought they were untouchable. Tonight, they'd learn otherwise. At their table near the stage, the Wilson family was in full performance mode. Linda, dripping in diamonds, air-kissed acquaintances. Frank, dour as ever, nursed a scotch. Nathan, in a flashy suit, bragged to a bored-looking investor about his consulting firm. Emily laughed at their banter, but her hand tightened on Jacob's when their eyes met, as if testing his mood. He squeezed back, his smile unwavering. Let her think she's winning, he thought. Dinner passed in a blur of small talk and clinking glasses. Jacob played his role perfectly, complimenting Emily's dress, nodding at Linda's stories, even chuckling at Nathan's weak jabs about car guys. But his pulse quickened as the clock neared 9 p.m. Michael, stationed near the AV booth, caught his eye and gave a subtle nod. Everything was ready. The gala's MC, a polished woman in a sequin dress, took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of our most generous donors, Jacob Taylor, to share a few words about our mission. Applause rippled through the room as Jacob rose, brushing a kiss against Emily's cheek before heading to the podium. He adjusted the mic, scanning the sea of faces. The Wilsons sat front and center, oblivious to the storm about to break. "Thank you all for being here," Jacob began, his voice clear and steady. "This gala supports kids who need us most, and I'm honored to contribute. But tonight, I want to share something personal, a story about trust, betrayal, and standing up for what's right." He pressed a remote, and the screen behind him flickered. A photo appeared, Emily and Grant Russell, hands clasped across a candlelit table. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Emily froze, her wine glass trembling in her hand. "This is my wife, Emily," Jacob said, his tone hardening, "and her lover, Grant Russell, her divorce attorney. For 8 months, they've been planning to take half my business in a divorce she filed 2 weeks ago." The screen shifted to text messages, Emily and Nathan plotting, Linda's venomous advice. "Her family's been in on it," Jacob continued, his eyes locking with Linda's. "They didn't just want half. They wanted everything." Another click revealed Nathan's forged invoices, labeled tax evasion evidence. "Nathan tried to blackmail me," Jacob said, "with lies he hoped would force me to settle. But here's the truth. He's been meeting a fixer under FBI scrutiny. Those lies are crumbling as we speak." The crowd murmured, phones already out, recording the scandal. Emily's face was ashen, her hands gripping the table. Linda whispered frantically to Frank, who looked ready to bolt. Nathan's bravado vanished, his eyes darting for an exit. "And Grant Russell," Jacob said, clicking to affidavits from Grant's former clients. "He's made a career of seducing clients while representing them, a clear ethics violation. The Texas Bar Association will have plenty to review tomorrow." The room was electric with shock. Jacob paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I'm sharing this not for pity, but for accountability. These people thought they could deceive me, manipulate me, because I treated them with kindness despite their disdain. They were wrong." With a final click, the screen returned to the gala's logo. "Now, let's refocus on what matters," Jacob said, his voice softening. "I'm pledging $750,000 to the Children's Hospital tonight, because no betrayal will stop us from doing good." Uncertain applause broke out, swelling as the crowd processed his grace under fire. Jacob stepped down, ignoring the Wilsons' table as he headed for the exit. Emily stood, tears streaming, but he didn't look back. Michael met him outside, clapping his shoulder. "You nailed it." "Not done yet," Jacob said, his voice low. A text from Laura buzzed in. "IRS notified about Frank's offshore accounts. Audit starts tomorrow." Jacob exhaled, the cool night air steadying him. The Wilsons' world was unraveling, just as they'd planned to unravel his. But a new twist lingered. Michael's earlier warning about a second fixer Nathan had contacted, someone still in the shadows. Jacob's trap had sprung, but the game wasn't over. Not yet. Jacob Taylor stood on the balcony of his new downtown Dallas condo, the city skyline shimmering under a crisp autumn sunset. At 42, he felt lighter than he had in months, the weight of Emily's betrayal finally lifting. The gala a month ago, where he'd exposed her affair with Grant Russell and the Wilsons' plot to seize his auto empire, had changed everything. That night, in front of Dallas's elite, Jacob hadn't just protected his legacy, he'd reclaimed his life. The fallout was swift and merciless. Emily, blindsided by Jacob's meticulous evidence, had crumbled. Her divorce filing, built on lies about his finances, collapsed when Laura Bennett's holding company revealed Jacob's dealerships were untouchable. She walked away with nothing but her clothes and a modest severance Jacob offered, not out of kindness, but to close the chapter cleanly. Her PR career tanked as clients fled, tainted by her scandal. Last Jacob heard, she'd moved to Houston, scraping by at a small marketing firm. The Wilsons fared no better. Frank's offshore accounts, flagged by Laura's tip to the IRS, triggered a brutal audit. He settled for millions, liquidating assets to keep their Highland Park mansion, but his oil money reputation was ash. Linda, once a socialite queen, was shunned. Her charity boards dropped her luncheons canceled. Nathan's blackmail scheme imploded when Michael Carter's evidence tied him to an FBI-watched fixer. His consulting gigs vanished, and he now pushed used cars at a lot in Fort Worth, a humbling fall for a man who'd mocked Jacob's roots. Grant Russell, the slick attorney, faced the harshest blow. The Texas Bar Association, armed with Jacob's affidavits from Grant's former clients, suspended his license pending a full probe. His firm cut ties, and he slunk off to a paralegal job in Austin, his charm useless without a law degree. Jacob took no joy in their ruin, but he believed in consequences. They'd tried to destroy him. Justice had answered, yet a loose and nagged him. Michael had uncovered a second fixer Nathan contacted, a shadow figure who'd vanished when the gala hit the news. Probably spooked, Michael sat over coffee at Jacob's new place, a modern space with clean lines and no trace of Emily's presence. But I'm keeping eyes out. Guys like that don't stay quiet forever. Jacob nodded, sipping his whiskey. Let me know if he resurfaces. I'm done looking over my shoulder. The condo's doorbell rang, pulling Jacob from his thoughts. Guests were arriving for his housewarming, a small circle of loyal friends and colleagues who'd stood by him through the storm. Michael and his wife, Laura and her partner, a few dealership managers who'd become like family. The air filled with laughter and clinking glasses, a stark contrast to the tense dinners with the Wilsons. Laura cornered him by the kitchen island, her sharp eyes glinting. You did more than protect your assets, Jacob. You showed this city who you are. Didn't have a choice, he said, shrugging. They came for everything. And lost it all, she said, raising her wineglass. To justice. To moving on, Jacob added, clinking her glass. Later, as the party wound down, Jacob stepped back onto the balcony, the city's hum a soothing backdrop. His phone buzzed, a text from Emily, the first in weeks. I'm sorry, Jacob. For everything. I know it doesn't fix it, but I mean it. He stared at the words, searching for the anger that once burned so fiercely. It was gone, replaced by a quiet clarity. Emily had chosen greed over love, betrayal over loyalty. Her apology changed nothing, but it was a reminder of what he'd survived. He deleted the message without replying. The divorce had finalized days ago, a brief courtroom affair where Emily sat silently, her new lawyer conceding to Jacob's terms. She'd looked small, defeated, a far cry from the confident woman he'd married. Jacob felt no triumph, only relief. The life they'd built was a lie, but the one he was building now, rooted in truth and trust, was real. Michael joined him outside, leaning on the railing. You okay, man? Better than okay, Jacob said, gazing at the skyline. I thought this would break me. It didn't. Made you stronger, Michael said. Hell, you're the guy who took on the Wilsons and walked away taller. Jacob chuckled, the sound genuine. They thought I was an easy mark. Should have known better. They all should, Michael said, grinning. What's next? Jacob considered the question. His dealerships were thriving, new clients drawn by his resilience. He'd started mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing the lessons he'd learned the hard way. And for the first time in years, he felt open to possibility. New friendships, maybe even love, though that was a distant thought. Next, he said, a spark in his eyes. I live. On my terms. Inside, the last guests were leaving, their voices fading into warm goodbyes. Jacob lingered on the balcony, the whiskey's amber glow catching the city lights. The Wilsons had wanted to strip him bare, to leave him broken. Instead, they'd freed him, from deception, from doubt, from a future built on sand. He thought back to that night in the garage, overhearing Emily and Nathan's plot. It had felt like the end of his world. Now he saw it for what it was, the start of something better. The fixer in the shadows might still be out there, but Jacob wasn't afraid. He'd face the worst and come out whole. Raising his glass to the city, Jacob smiled. Sometimes, the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was thriving. And that's exactly what he'd do. What would you do if your partner betrayed you like this? Would you walk away, or burn it all down?